So what I want to do first of all is the idea behind this hangout that we're doing is just to tell some stories and talk about the process of self-publishing, maybe what each of you guys learned, reading authority, how you got inspired to start. But first of all, let's just go down the list and give us a quick, 30, 60-second background on yourself, um, what you do for work, maybe what you were doing before you wrote a book, and tell us what your book is, and I'll drop the links into the chat. So Brandon, you are first in line according to how everyone's heads are showing up on the screen. So go
Okay,
ahead.
doke. Yeah, my name's Brandon Hilker, and I'm a Rails developer, full time, and I have been doing that. I've been in technology for about 10 years, doing Rails development for 3 or 4, and I wrote a book called Build a Ruby Gem, and the book is all about building Ruby gems, specifically around open source software. Pretty technical book. There's a lot of code in it. I released the book at the end of March. Spent about 3 months working on it, and read Authority last summer, and that's what really got me going on the self-publishing um, project.
Nice. So now you uh, are you working at a company full time
Yeah,
or?
I work at a SaaS CRM called Pipeline Deals, and I worked there prior and still work there now. And so this was a complete side project, doing nights and weekends, just trying to fit in where I could. I'd been thinking about the concept for the book for a while, so the ideas were in my head, had been for a couple of years since my experience getting started with open source about 3 years ago. So, the pain of what the book actually solves was something that was in the back of my head, and I knew there wasn't tons of documentation and material around solving that problem for people or helping them through the process. And so that, when thinking about writing a book came about, that kind of popped out to me, and that's was one of the strongest topics that I headed towards.
Nice. All right, Jason, you're next.
Yeah, my name is Jason Rodriguez. I am a web designer. I currently work at a company called Litmus that builds software for email marketers. Prior to that, I worked in the agency setting, and I did email marketing and front-end design for a couple of big companies. And I'd always kind of thought about writing a book, and finally bit the bullet when, after I read Authority and kind of used that as motivation to write a book called Modern HTML Email, which is all about the process of designing and actually coding HTML emails for desktop, mobile devices. It has very strong focus on responsive email design, which email is a very kind of underserved market right now as far as education goes. So it was a really good market to get into, and it's done pretty well and kind of opened up a lot of doors for me.
Nice. All right, Samuel.
I'm a longtime UX designer and consultant, and wrote a book specifically focusing on user onboarding called, unsurprisingly, The Elements of User Onboarding.
Nice. All right, so let's see. Where's a good place to start? Um, I guess when you guys were each thinking about writing a book, where or what made you think it was possible? Just talk through like what was going on um, early on in that process. What actually motivated you? It sounds like everybody had the idea for a book for quite a while. So yeah, I want to hear more about that. Uh,
I think personally, I never really had the specific idea for the book. It was more I wanted to write something. I just didn't know what to actually tackle. And the thought of actually doing technical writing or nonfiction didn't necessarily occur to me until after I kind of started following your website and see how you went through that process. So then I started looking at kind of the skill set that I had, and I had spent a number of years doing email marketing and email design, which is, like I said, not something that a lot of people necessarily talk about. So it seemed like a very easy thing to kind of get into. It's something I knew a lot about, and it just kind of developed that, oh, that's what I should write a book about. So I kind of went along with the process of authority and ended up writing and self-publishing a book, and good things have happened since then.
nice, and we'll get into all that. But Brandon or Samuel, why don't you jump in?
Last year, I specifically remember following your conversations around habits, and doing things every day. And you talked a lot early on about writing every day and how that changed um, your habit and dedication towards it. And I was probably one of the people that, asked 5 years ago, somebody asked, would you write a book? And I would say there's absolutely no way I would ever do something like that, and didn't have the skills to do it. And so historically I wasn't a very strong writer, and that was one of those things in the back of my head that I thought, would sort of stop me from self-publishing something. And so I read, a lot of your posts discussing email lists and your iOS apps specifically, just about getting into the habit of writing consistently every day, and that struck a chord with me. And obviously, just doing the things I've done, I've realized, practice obviously helps, and I figured I could hopefully get better by writing consistently. And so late last year, I had this very vivid moment. I was reading Authority and finished it on the beach, and it was like one of those like movie slow-mo moments where I got up and I was like, I can do this, and like seriously, it was the first time I ever thought that was possible. And I think Authority to me broke it down in a way that was much less intimidating. So it took away the idea that you needed these precious writing skills and all this marketing tactic to actually accomplish this. To me it was a very straightforward plan that I felt I could follow directions pretty well. So if I could do that and it was true, then it would work out okay. And some of the bits about editing and that kind of thing, and I realized I could hire people to make it sound better than perhaps it came out of me sounding. So the book to me made it a lot more approachable. And so reading the book, I just started a blog. I didn't have one before, so I spent about 3 months just posting. I think at the time I was posting weekly, just getting into that habit. And I took your approach, and I was just writing and writing and writing, and the effects were pretty quick for me to notice that it was a little rough. I was starting to get feedback, there's typos here and there, so I was a little more adamant about that, and slowly it started to get better. And then I started getting feedback that was like, I really enjoy your writing, and that just blew my mind. And so to me that was kind of like that little peak I got over that was like, wow, this is something I can do. And not only that, but I had this plan that's very clearly laid out in Authority to help me follow through on the marketing, which was, as a developer, which was the most intimidating part for me. I felt like I had all the content to write it, but how would I ever get anybody to buy it? And so that was where Authority really came through for me.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, Samuel, you have anything to add on that before we move on to the?
Sure. Yeah. My way of coming to it was a little bit different. That a lot of the past projects that I've taken on have been really design or production heavy, and not so much sales heavy. And so one thing that I was really focused on with whatever my next project was going to be was actually bringing it to market and looking, really focusing on building up, as you have mentioned, building up an audience and coming up with tiered pricing, things like that. That was something that I could apply to a SaaS company, or I could apply to a really, constrained product like an ebook. And I thought that taking my lumps and making some rookie mistakes on creating something a lot more constrained from a product standpoint would be a good way to get my feet wet in that regard. So that's why I chose to write an ebook.
Nice. Got a couple emails from people saying that the World Cup is kicking off right now, and so for everyone who's watching, I appreciate you for hanging out with us.
Right, I bet their ratings are dipping bad.
Cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is getting those first few subscribers. So you've got the idea to write the book, and then how do you go from no audience to actually getting people to pay attention and to sign up for the list?
Yeah, I can jump in. I had absolutely no audience whatsoever. I didn't even have an email list when I started. I basically, just decided to do it and put up a landing page to try to generate signups and generate traffic to said landing page. So I distinctly remember my first efforts, resulting in, running into the house from my office and letting my wife know that I got 1 sign up or 2 signups or something like that, and thinking it was so cool. So I really remember the early days. What specifically did you want to, like, the arc on how to get your first 50, or?
Yeah, let's talk about that. The first 50 or 100. What you did to get to that point.
Okay. So just getting the landing page up, and I guess there's kind of the calling in favors from friends and family kind of stuff. But the first strangers that signed up were largely because I needed to find a way to generate traffic for the landing page. For me, writing is weirdly for being the author of a book a really torturously long and strained process. And so instead of doing that, having the UX background that I did, I thought that putting up a teardown, which is something that I would do for a lot of consulting projects anyway, would make a lot of sense. So in my case, I just picked a company at random, did a teardown for their onboarding experience, and put it up on SlideShare. And then at the end of the slideshow, sent people to a landing page, and it was very much kind of duct taped together. But that was the very first step, toe in the water, so to speak, and that's what got me. I would say that probably got me up to my first 50 or so.
Nice. Jason?
Mine was more a matter of using blogging and Twitter. I again put up a landing page pretty early on in the process, which was good. But I really used my blog as a way to kind of establish myself as an expert. I had kind of blogged on and off for a couple of years, but nothing really serious. So this is kind of my chance to practice that process while kind of trying to grow this audience. And I had a couple of articles that did pretty well on things like Designer News or Hacker News, so I got a fair amount of traffic through that, but really kind of coupling the blogging with Twitter worked out really well. Most of the articles in my book are geared towards email marketers, which is a relatively small community in the wider tech world. So they're all generally very friendly and outgoing and stuff, so I found it pretty surprisingly easy to get a good following both on Twitter and people that would visit my pages and follow that through to the landing page, sign up for the newsletter. So it was very much a process of establishing myself as an expert through blogging and kind of using social media to generate that traffic.
Nice. And Brandon, you covered it a little bit already, but yeah, what worked for you for building your list?
Yeah, I threw the blog up with an email subscription form for a newsletter first thing, just because of all the discussion around email and how valuable it was. So I posted, I think my first blog post was something very kind of feeling the waters out, and then I posted a second one about it was called 3 Ways to Get Started with Open Source Software, and it wasn't language specific, but it was one of those things around open source that I thought was challenging, along with actually building open source software in Ruby. And that did one of those front page of Hacker News, everybody and their mom retweeted type things. And that was in contrast to the first one, which was like, crickets.
Right.
So having the idea that I had these ideas in the back of my head that I could help solve this pain about getting started with Ruby open source, and then seeing people's interest in how to get started with open source. The everything was kind of lining up. That sort of confirming in my head that the topic was valid and people were interested in. So I kind of took the next step possible. I was still very reluctant to sink in a couple months into writing a book because I still wasn't. I wanted to be like totally sure that
Right.
not only would I write it, but people would actually pay for it. And I threw up a course. I spent I think a couple hours every morning for a week straight putting together what ultimately ended up being the first 5 chapters of the book. So I did a 5-lesson, 10-day free course and threw that up pretty quickly with a landing page on my blog to sort of test the waters. And to me, in the back of my head, I don't know where this number came from, but I thought that if 100 or 200 people signed up for the course within a first little bit, that it meant that people were interested in the topic. It didn't necessarily mean that they would pay for it, but it meant that at least there was enough interest for me to continue and maybe validate some other way. So I threw the course up, and I think within a couple weeks, 600 to 700 people had signed up, and to me that was mind-blowing. So that was the validation for me to continue on. And so I had, the great part about it was I had all that information, those emails, and I started to leverage that list about what were the other topics that people wanted to learn about, because I had covered them, I thought pretty well in the first in the course, which amounted to the first 5 chapters or so. So after that, it was like, what are the real value adds that I can include in a book that would make it, worth pulling out your credit card for. So that was how I got in my head, convinced that I'm gonna actually write the book.
Right. So you had an email list that was separate from. So the course email list was separate from the book pre-launch email list, right?
That's right. Yeah, I had no idea what I was doing, so I was like, well, I can't, do one of those sign up for Mailchimp things and have them already be on the list, and then they won't get the course. So I'll just make another list because it was the shortest way to get to where I wanted to go. So I created a separate list, yeah, and there was some duplication, and ultimately leveraged the email list for the feedback
Okay.
towards the book.
Nice.
But still kind of trickled out some ideas that I was going to do the book to the main list.
Mm-hmm.
So once I threw up a landing page for the real book, I created yet another list for what I gave away to be some sample content and a discount code when the book launched.
I did the exact same thing. I had two totally different lists for absolutely no reason, and wound up just merging them.
Yeah. I've ultimately done the same.
Yeah, I actually I did something very, very similar where I had different lists for everything, and then since then I've learned that you really want one list with like a little bit of ability to segment and be like, you know what, this is just for people who signed up specifically for the book. Like I might send out an additional reminder email to people who signed up specifically to hear about the book, versus people who just signed up for a course or something like that. But yeah, generally one list works better. Yeah. Let's see. So let's talk about actually writing the book. So someone accused me recently of making that process sound too easy. And so I want to make it clear that writing a book is really, really hard. And so I want to hear more of, your guys' experiences. What worked as far as actually making progress? Was it difficult for you? And how long did it take from start to finish? All of that. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I can. One thing for me, I'm glad that you made it sound easy. One thing that when I was in the middle of writing the book, one thing I said to people over and over again when they're like, "Oh, how's that going?" or things like that, was that I was really glad I didn't know what I was getting myself into, or I never would have started. And so,
Nice.
Being really fully committed to writing the book before jumping in is what really got me through it. And if I had really known what I was doing, I probably would have decided not to do it. So I'm glad that it's over with, but I'm also glad that I was kind of foolish enough to start to begin with. So that's my very quick take on that, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, for me, the content initially came out pretty easy. So the rough draft of the book for me took probably a month, and again, I was working full time, so nights and weekends, hour here, hour there. But it was largely content that I had been sort of tossing around in my head for years, and so it was really just about how to organize it, and how I thought people could kind of best digest it. So the email course for me set the stage for that. It was an intro plus some really some early dive into how this process worked, and then later on it was some real value adds for integration into Rails specifically. I thought was a big thing, obviously, for Ruby developers. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. The hardest process for me was editing, and I read a bunch of things. I think people suggested hiring somebody. I didn't really have anything set up for business or money in the bank. For investing into this. I really was uncertain about how this whole thing worked. So if I were to do it again, an editor would probably be one of the first things I would hire for. So that was the part that was most difficult to me. The original rough draft was pretty easy, and I had a handful of people volunteer to do both like a grammatical review and then a technical review. The book is largely code, and so I felt that both of those were important, and I got tons of value out of the people that reviewed the book. So it was really awesome. But when it came down to it, I ended up, after I got the feedback from the reviews, I changed a lot of it, based on feedback. I thought we could make it better. Their comments were awesome, so I had to go over and edit it again, and it was hard. Reading that much content. I mean, the book's 130, 140 pages, and just reading it, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a row. Like you just start going a little crazy. I printed it out at Staples. It was like highlighting stuff and marking through stuff, and then that copy was bad now because it was old. Now I'd go print it out again, and it was really crazy. So editing, hire an editor if you can.
Did Jason or Samuel, did either of you hire an editor?
I did not. My wife is actually a phenomenal writer. She's a way better writer than I am, so she took over the task of editing my book for me. So she got a little bit lost just because it's a technical book. There's a lot of code in there. So she would kind of get lost in some of those explanations and stuff. She did a great job helping me out with just grammatical stuff and the flow of the book and make sure it's pretty accessible to actually get through. So I have to thank her for that one.
I did not hire an editor. I had somebody sign on that it's kind of one of those things where, like, if somebody doesn't, if you're not paying someone, you can't fire them. So I'm fortunately really pretty OCD about typos and grammar to begin with, so I pretty much just edited as I went through. And then following on Brandon's point about reading it through a bunch of times, one thing that I did was decide to record an audiobook version that I recorded myself, and that was really helpful to just take one final pass. If you're reading it out loud, you kind of come across things that you're like, I wouldn't actually phrase it that way if it was actually coming out of my mouth, or things like that. And then at the end of the day, you also get an audiobook out of it, which is a nice upsell. So I'd recommend doing that.
Yeah. A couple people are asking, where to hire an editor, or how much they cost, or that sort of thing. I'd say that you can find editors on Odesk or Elance and all of that, and they'll work just fine. $25 an hour is plenty to pay an editor. I'm sure you could find people who are good for less than that. Don't think that hiring an editor is going to cost you like $2,000. I bet you could find someone good for under $500 to have your whole book edited.
I think that was also part of the process that intimidated me a little bit, knowing that I could go out and hire somebody and it may just be okay, And so if I had known somebody, I probably would have latched onto that a little sooner. But the whole process of finding someone felt a little large for what I was doing.
I think there's kind of the thing too where, like, an editor could be someone that says, hey, you need to rework this chapter because it's crap or whatever, versus someone that's just correcting mistakes or typos or things like that. So I don't know. I mean, is there a distinction between those two? Because that's actually something that I was curious about when I came into the process and never really found out for myself.
Well, for me, the technical editors that volunteered did a lot of that. So it was like, and it was more structured around code, maybe because the book is largely code, but it was like, introducing this later on didn't make sense. They were probably like out of context at that point. Maybe you should put this concept or this piece of code earlier on. So for me it was like placement of code was really about the flow, less about the grammatical stuff, and the grammatical stuff is really what I struggled with just because of my I wasn't a great writer to start, and I'm still trying to get better, and so that was the hardest part for me. But I guess it's largely personal, whatever your strengths are, I would say.
Yeah, I think I would do two different kinds of editing. I would get, friends and peers to do like a technical editing, maybe one chapter at a time. And that's where you're really asking, is the quality good? Am I explaining these concepts well? And then you can also hire out, the writing editing. Am I using English properly? Are there typos? And I would go two different directions for that. I would also be careful not to go out to too many people at once, because they're all going to catch the same things. This is something in usability testing where if you have software tested by 5 people, they're all going to catch 80% of the same bugs, and you can't get past those until, and start catching new bugs until you fix the first ones. So, yeah, I think that's enough on editing. Let's see. So, I guess let's talk about launch. So maybe the final part of building that email list and actually launching a book. Do I need to pick somebody?
I'll go. I pretty much, pulled the Authority marketing plan straight from the book and followed it, exactly as printed. I early on offered that discount code, so I was building up the list. I was keeping in touch with the list, showing progress. Taking pictures of Staples printouts, with markings through them, and just trying to show that I was making progress. And here's the couple chapters that I, kind of worked through this weekend. And then, that final sequence, just about, I think one of the things that I kept having to remind myself is in the book you made a point to say, give away a lot of content and give away your best content. And that was, it found counterintuitive to me. And it was like, well, what's going to be left? But, ultimately the best content is different to each person. And so I took the strongest chapters, and every week for about 4 weeks leading up to the book, dropped one chapter at a time. And they generated a huge amount of buzz. And then that week of, I did exactly, what was mentioned in Authority, which was just let people know, remind them, give them, all the details about the packages, and then day of, here it is. A couple hours before, here's to the people who didn't buy, here's the discount code. It's going to end soon, and yeah, it was awesome, and it worked.
Nice. So tell a little more about how the launch go. Like, how big was the email list? What did you do on pricing, and then how did sales go?
Again, I not knowing any better, I just did exactly what Authority printed, which was create tiers. Last minute, I kind of scurried around to make screencasts, knowing that was going to be the highest tier. I had 3 tiers. One was the book plus the code, and the last one was the book, the code, and 14 screencasts. So I kind of packed those in the last weekend before the launch, but thankful I got it done because as suggested, it brought in the highest amount of revenue with the lowest amount of sales. So I think the list at launch was around 650 for the book itself, and then my newsletter was a little bigger than that, just from the blogs and everything. So I didn't annoy those people as much, but hammered the book list pretty hard based on all the sequence of emails that you suggested.
Do you have some launch numbers that you can share?
Yeah, so I think
revenue-wise?
Day of sales were a little over $8,000, and nice. I don't have I haven't quite figured out because of the newsletter lists were a little different. I haven't quite diffed the who bought off the list. I think it was somewhere around 15 to 20% of the people that had signed up for the beta or for the discount code. Right, it was separate from the course. Again, a different list. So of the people that signed up to have the discount code, those are the number of people that bought.
Got it. Yeah, we'll get into how sales have done since then. But Jason, you want to go next and talk about building up your launch and then numbers?
Absolutely, yeah. My launch was a little bit different. I am admittedly a little bit lazier when it comes to marketing, especially email marketing, which is weird because I work in the email marketing industry. So leading up to launch, through the landing page and my blog post, which I had email sign-up forms on there, I only had a little over 200 people on my list. So I didn't do a lot leading up to that. I sent out a few emails like, hey, I'm going to launch this the next week or two. Then launch day, I sent out an email to that list and let them know it was available. And I think that first day I only got about 25 or 30 sales, which was a couple $100 based on my pricing. But then I got a little bit of a bump later on in the week. It was featured in sidebar.io, which resulted in got almost $1,400 in revenue after that, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I was very kind of lazy about marketing and stuff. My pricing is a little bit different. I didn't really follow the tiered approach that you kind of suggest. I have 2 options for buying it. One is the digital version, which is $15, and then I also offer a print version for $20. So I didn't have any packages beyond that. All the codes contained within the book, everybody can access it. And the offering of the print version has worked out kind of strangely. But I think I kind of have plans for a second book in the future. So I think at that point, I definitely want to experiment more with the kind of authority model of having different tiers and doing video packaging, different packages that I can sell at high rates, and see how that works out well, because obviously it's worked out pretty well for you guys.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between maximizing for revenue and maybe, which is what the tiered pricing really does well, versus selling a book in a more traditional way, and
Yeah.
and you're definitely like your pricing scheme and that kind of thing is much more normal for what someone would expect for a book.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of that too is I almost feel like at this point, in retrospect, I feel like I've kind of sold myself short in that manner. I think I kind of underpriced a little bit than what I probably could have charged, which kind of sucks at this point. But I mean, it's kind of I learned a lesson, so I kind of want to experiment more with that in the future for future launches.
Um, let's see. So, yeah, we can get into pricing a little more later. But Samuel, let's talk about your launch.
Sure. So I built my list up to a little under 6,000 subscribers. Once again, it was sort of the mashup list between two lists that shouldn't have been two different lists to begin with. So I sent that. Yeah. So that's what I launched to. I also did a lot of legwork in sending out advanced copies, so that not only would I be launching to a list, but I'd also be showing up on Twitter from a lot of different influential people and things like that. And so launch day, I really messed up my tiers big time, and I also really did not spend enough time on my sales page. I was like literally editing my book up until hours before the launch, which was a gigantic boneheaded mistake. So I made a little bit over $7,000 on launch, and then things have gotten better since then. But that's where I landed.
Um, you say you really messed up the tiered packages. Can you talk a little more about that or the pricing?
Yeah, so it was kind of a combination between the tiers and the sales page, where the sales page didn't really communicate the value of the different tiers very clearly and effectively, and then the tiers themselves were priced in such a way that I thought, well, I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot, especially with pricing as you go in, and you really just don't know what the market's going to respond with. But in my particular case, people just sort of, I got a lot of feedback, like people were saying, their mental calculator was coming out, and they were just trying to think, like, is it really worth an extra $250 to go out from one tier to the other, things like that. And, in retrospect, I wish I had priced it a little bit more of a no-brainer. And then another thing, like Brandon mentioned, having a discount. I'm not sure if Jason had a discount on lunch or not, but mine
I
was.
did it now.
Yeah, mine was 10%. I don't know what Brandon's was, but I'm guessing it was more than 10%. Yeah, I would really recommend. It's kind of like, do it right or don't bother kind of a thing. Where 10%, I thought it was a motivating percentage, and I got a lot of feedback that it really wasn't. So I would definitely recommend like 15 at the least, and 20. It's not a time to be stingy, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is you have no cost of goods sold for your downloadable ebook. So I'd say if you're going to offer a discount, I wouldn't really do less than 20% because you want to reward your early buyers, and you want to motivate them to make a purchase, because when you get into adding some kind of urgency, like the sale ending, if a 10% off sale is ending on a $39 book, I don't really care. 20% off, that'll motivate me, but 10% just doesn't. So
I literally heard, like, people emailed me with that exact same sentiment more than once on launch day. So yeah, exactly. I can speak from experience on that one.
nice. All right, let's talk about. Let's take some questions. So we've got a bunch of people in the chat. So if you guys want to post some questions, and we'll go through a few of them before we move on to talking about after the launch and how things have changed. But just looking through here. Okay, so we have a question from That Moody Guy. He's wondering about how he came up for topics for a book. How did you decide what to write about specifically?
I can feel that one. So for me, I actually had a really burning desire to talk about a very esoteric concept, which is like aligning your business success around making your customers more successful. So initially, like when I put the landing page up, the title of the book was called Customer Growth. And when I would tell people that I was writing a book, they're like, "Oh, what's it about?" And I would be like, "Well, like if you have 5 minutes, I can probably explain it to you." And I knew that was a huge problem, and like there was no, I didn't know who I was selling it to, and whoever that hypothetical type of person might be, I knew that they weren't like, you know what, like I should do a search to see if there's a book out here on this thing that doesn't even really have a name. And so it was through the process of creating the first teardown that I used to drive traffic to the landing page that I really quickly saw people were describing it as a user onboarding teardown, and kind of got the topic through the process of trying to generate the traffic. Really quickly iterated on that and decided like that was really the thing. That was the handle to approach it by, and put everything under the name of that container instead. And I'm really, really, really glad that I did.
Nice. Jason?
My process was more looking at, I didn't have a specific topic in mind, but then I just kind of looked at the skill set that I had, and tried to identify an area, a skill that I had that I knew inside and out that wasn't really served very well, and I had been doing email design for years, and up until the past about 6, 7, 8 months, email design's been very archaic. People don't really talk about it that much. There aren't really good up-to-date books on the subject, so that it was a light bulb that this is something I kind of have to write to serve that need. At that point, it was just a matter of sitting down and kind of churning out the book and making things actually happen.
For me, the technical challenges of getting into something like open source kind of stuck with me over the couple years after I was doing it actively. And the tech community is kind of a funny space because there's people that are like on the way up, these like real thought leader type people, and it can be really intimidating, I think, to try and approach that community with something of value, and you do it for a number of years, and maybe you have some senior title, whatever that means, but there's still moments where you feel like, oh man, classic imposter syndrome, I'm going to put this out there and somebody's going to go, you have no idea what you're talking about. And one of the reminders from the book, Nathan, I don't remember if it was in the book or it was just something you said consistently, was that someone always knows less than you. And after doing it for a number of years, I was really active in learning and just always wanted to dig into more. I was self-taught programmer, so to me, I always felt like I was at a disadvantage to those that went to school for computer science. So I always had to catch up, and my way of catching up was just like extreme motivation to learn and to dig into topics that were non-trivial. And so just that consistency and showing up really helped me to, I would say, get on top of my career and my skill set, and which ultimately, made me realize that people that, those kind of thought leader type people are probably not the ones that are going to buy my book, but they're also the smallest community in any tech community. There's a handful of select few that I look up to quite a bit, and they're not going to be my audience. They're, the thousands of other people, maybe more than that, that are learning to program and learning Ruby will be my audience. And, if I let those couple people stop me, it would really be unfortunate, especially for something that I thought needed, better documentation and material on for people to learn. So when I got started with open source, it was challenging, and that stuck with me over time. And after a couple of years, I thought this is a perfect subject.
Nice. So the next question, did any of you do pre-orders, or did you all go straight to launch?
Straight to launch.
All right. Yeah. So we'll talk about pre-orders another time. Maybe I'll get a different crew on here who has done pre-orders. I tend to not do them, but someone was asking about that. So, all right. I want to move on a little bit and talk about after the launch. So we can talk about numbers, but also what changed for you after writing a book? Like, what impact has that had on, I don't know, anything from confidence to consulting gigs to jobs to how financial situation has changed? Like, how is your life different now after you've written a book?
I can start with that one if you want. It's financially, it's been awesome. I mean, I haven't made, I think, anywhere near what you three have. All told, I've probably made a little over $10,000 off the book in the past 6 months or so, which is cool. I mean, it's nice to have that coming in. But outside of that, I think the biggest thing is that it's really established me more or less as an expert in the email design field. And it's kind of opened up doors for me. I've met a lot of people after writing it. I've spoken to a lot of people. And actually, I kind of got recruited more or less by a great company in Boston called Litmus that builds tools for email designers, and actually got a job that way. With if I hadn't have written this book or kind of exposed myself to that audience, there's no way in hell that probably would have happened. It's a long shot. Um, so it's the financial aspect's awesome, but just kind of that growing my reputation has been unbelievable to actually watch. It's amazing the kind of doors that I've opened up since releasing something, and I think that just has more to do with getting your name out there and teaching what you know and just sharing as much as you possibly can is probably the best thing you can do, and writing a book is a great way to go about doing that.
Nice. So I think it was at Business of Software last year, the conference held in Boston. I ran into Paul, who's one of the co-founders
Yep.
of, and so he and I had a fun chat about how, uh, basically how you writing the book, they came across that, and I don't know the full story, but it was because of the book that they wanted to hire you because they were looking for
Yeah.
someone to actually run their whole community and
Hmm.
outreach and that sort of thing. And so, like, obviously this guy really, really cares about email design, which is what
Yeah,
Litmus is
absolutely.
all about.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it was actually it was interesting. I One of the things I did in my book was reach out to kind of those thought leaders in the industry and see if they could provide quotes for kind of section breaks throughout the book. And one of those people is Justine Jordan, who's the marketing director at Litmus, who I kind of knew of through Twitter and maybe tweet at her a couple of times, but didn't really have a relationship with her. But after talking to her about the book, that just kind of got us talking and led to this conversation about how there's not a lot of education or a real community around email marketing and design. And she shared with me kind of her long term dream of having this email design community, and Litmus was finally in a place where they can devote a lot of resources to building something like that. So we had an interesting phone conversation, a couple of emails, kind of sharing this vision of what an email design community might look like. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, she kind of said, "Oh, maybe you could work with us or something," but I thought that was going to be in like a freelance writing capacity, like maybe write some tutorials or write for their blog or something like that. And actually, in September, my wife and I had our second daughter, and so we were in the hospital, and she's in labor. And I get an email from Paul saying, "Hey, do you want to come work for Litmus?" And it was just this kind of mind blowing thing. But yeah,
You
it
were
was
checking your
all
email while she was in labor?
well. It was early on. The contractions were still a little ways apart. But yeah, I just felt my phone vibrate and popped it open and showed her, and she's like, "That's cool. We're having a baby." But it was awesome, and it was that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have kind of opened myself up by writing this book and got my name out there. Yeah, so then it was a short series of interviews, and I'm full time at Litmus and loving my job. It's like this thing helped me land this dream job, and now I get to do something that I love doing and connecting with a lot of people and helping build this great community around email design. So it's I couldn't be happier with the outcome of it.
Nice. Another example of getting a job through writing a book that I can think of is Brett Kelly, who wrote Evernote Essentials.
Hmm.
And he now works at Evernote, leading. I think he writes all their documentation and training and all of that because he's obviously very, very good at it.
Hmm.
Um, and for him, it kind of started the same way, where he reached out to them about. I think he was asking like if he could use their name in the book, actually use Evernote in the
Hmm.
book, and they were like, yeah, that's cool, and they had some restrictions on that, but that just started a conversation, and so it just goes to show that when you're working on a book and there's related companies in your field, reach out to them. I think getting quotes from them is a great pitch or a great way to start that conversation. So I really
Hmm.
like that idea.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how receptive people were to actually providing quotes for the book too. Like I approached people that I knew from the industry but never really spoke to before, and they were amazing about it. They're happy to help out, and I think a lot of people would find if they need those resources, don't really be afraid of approaching these people that are seen as thought leaders. Like they're people. They're looking to help other people out, and it's awesome how open people are about that.
Yeah. The other thing about what you're saying that stood out is that Uh, you mentioned that you've made $10,000 over the last 6 months or so off this book,
Mhm.
and it's crazy to me that when you said that, you described it as a low number. Like,
It's yeah, it's
just
I look at some of your guys' sales and it's to me that's a low number, but it's I mean it's awesome in my situation. Like that's a great thing to have. It's more than just like pocket change, you know. But that's I think that's me more beating myself up because I'm admittedly extremely lazy when it comes to marketing and stuff for this book. So I've been surprised that I've made that much, but at the same time I feel like for the next one I'm gonna go all out and I hopefully will get a lot larger return on that.
nice. Yeah, it just goes to show what's possible with a book, and yeah. When I wrote the app design handbook, my goal for it was to make $10,000 over the entire lifetime of the book. So maybe like in the first year
Hmm.
or more. So anyway, well done. Brandon, how's how has writing a book changed things for you?
All the same things. The people that reach out to you, I find really interesting. The tone kind of changes. So I have people writing to me about partnerships, and just things that they would have never just written to me about before, just because I threw up this landing page and have this book now, and job opportunities, you name it. Um, Again, the expertise, I think, puts your kind of badge on that. I've spoken to a number of people that are in the Ruby community and don't know my name associated with the book, but know the kind of book brand, the Build a Ruby Gem, whether it's the course of the book, and they go, "Oh, you're the Build a Ruby Gem guy," and I'm like, "Yeah, I guess that is me," and so creating this brand, it's cool to see that it's spread through a number of ways on the internet, and people find it, and just hearing the positive feedback. There's plenty of bad comments that you can easily get sucked into on message boards or wherever it is, Reddit or wherever your audience tends to hang out. But for me, I kind of harped on those a little bit, and there wasn't much of it, but the positive ones are just so much overwhelmingly better that I it's totally worth it. And for me, after the fact, it's brought in a good amount of money, and that's a nice thing. I hope to kind of continue this going forward as you've done with your books, and hopefully the next one's better or whatever, whether it's a book or a course or whatever. Um, but for me, the luxury is being on the beach and your phone dings and you just sold a book, and you don't have to do anything. Like you can choose to put in more effort for marketing. You can make a big push and you can see a direct relationship to sales after that, or you could do nothing and sales may trickle in, and that's your decision because you put all the work into it. So while the couple months that the heavy work was going on were kind of a pain, now when I'm sitting back and hanging out with the family and books are selling, I mean that there's not much better feeling than that to me.
Nice.
Because we equate work with money, and it's a direct relationship, and now just seeing that residual effect is pretty awesome.
So yeah, what are you at now for lifetime sales for the book?
I think a little over 12, so it's significantly decreased. It's about $300 or $400 a week, and that fluctuates significantly depending on whether I post and what the post is about. If it's in line with the book and I can upsell it. I've done a poor job at continuing the marketing just because I was a little burnt out from all the marketing, that was admittedly over my head. So, when it went well, I was like, woo, and then I just took a huge break. So, I'm trying to get better at building in, some soft sells into the things that I write about, integrate the course, put that more in front of the people that sign up to my newsletter. Just having all those different paths kind of combined into a way that funnels people into the book and shows that you have a product. Because admittedly, when a little bit ago when you landed on my site, it wasn't clear that I had a book. There's a link to books, but it didn't say, hey, check this out. Do you want to buy it? And so I was doing a bad job at that. I'm slowly getting better, and it's cool to see the direct relationship between putting in that kind of work that is sort of self-sustaining and sales as a result.
Nice. Yeah, I have the same issue with my site where after you launch something, maintaining those ongoing sales can be kind of hard, but especially hard if you don't even link to the product. So, like, I realized the other day that if you go to nathanberry.com you can't, other than in like certain blog posts, you can't find a link to my Photoshop course. And I was like, oh, maybe that's why the Photoshop course hasn't been selling as much lately.
Yeah. So I
So,
feel like the marketing changes a little bit after the fact. You've obviously proven to be pretty good at launches, and that's largely what I took away from Authority. And it switches after the fact. It's not this big build-up. There's less intensity around it, and I'm trying to overcome that. So maybe that could be your next book.
we'll see. All right, Samuel, how have things changed for you since after writing a book?
Yeah, things are very good. I think Jason at one point mentioned like just the benefit that you get from exposing yourself or just putting yourself out there is very different from toiling in obscurity, I guess you could say. So just going through the process, for me, a lot of it was working on promoting the book, creating the useronboard.com website was, I mean, the entire purpose behind it initially was just to drive traffic to a single landing page to get people to sign up for the book, and now it's a lot more than that. So that's led to some pretty cool phone calls and some really awesome consulting work and things like that. And as far as where I'm sitting right now is concerned, just having a book written is a really tremendous business asset that, like, I think Amy Hoy talks about, like stacking bricks and things like that, and just having something in place where if somebody can't afford me as a consultant, I can say, I can serve you this way and make some money off of it, but more importantly, just be helpful to people in a way that scales is really great. And then also using that to anchor my consulting price or as a throw-in or to help close a deal, things like that. And just having that as a piece of the puzzle is vastly better than not having a puzzle piece to begin with. So I'm really, really glad that I went through it and have that to work off of, especially, if I was an employee at a company, maybe it wouldn't be quite so valuable, but as a consultant, I could see it being valuable no matter what, but especially as a consultant.
Yeah, nice. So what are you at for lifetime revenue for your book?
Yeah, I just checked before we got on. I'm a little past 38.5 now.
Nice. And that's over what period of time? How long did you launch?
7 weeks.
Nice. That's good.
No,
so
that might be. No, that's not. No, like 9 weeks, I think, actually.
Okay.
So I launched March 27th. So whatever that, my math might not be very good there, but like a normal week would be between like 1 and 2K probably.
Nice. And so you've done a lot with continuing the user onboard site, for the teardowns and that kind of thing, to keep driving traffic, because actually the majority of your sales did not come during the launch, right?
Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, I'm not being modest when I say I really screwed up the launch. It's definitely kind of like a long-term play, which to me is more interesting anyway. That I wasn't interested in creating something and then just letting it fizzle out and moving on to the next thing. That I really wanted it to be a building block in that kind of way. And then for even before the book came out, every time I would put out a new teardown, good things would tend to happen. So more traffic would come to the site. More people would sign up for the email list. People would reach out and say, hey, this has been helpful. Could you do one for our company, privately for a fee or things like that? So it's definitely led to a significant amount of consulting work. Even if the book didn't exist or if it had never launched, I would keep putting out new teardowns just because I'm viewing it more as like an ecosystem where having the book as part of that is I think of it kind of like as a force multiplier. But either way, it's been a really nice. I don't know. I can't think of another word other than ecosystem, so I'll just use that one again. But for example, like a quick anecdote, somebody for some reason posted my site to Hacker News, or like the section of my site to Hacker News, while I was on vacation with my family and my in-laws, and wound up making like $1,500 that day. And it was really great to be able to like tell my wife's parents, like, dinner's on me, or dinner's on Hacker News tonight, basically, where it's really cool to make it to the front page to begin with, but to be able to actually get income because of it, as opposed to just exposure or traffic or signups or whatever, is really really cool. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice. So, I'll take another question from our audience, and people are wondering about publishing a paperback or a print book or not. Jason, you did a print book from the very beginning. Can you talk about that?
I did, yeah, I did a digital one through Gumroad, which has been awesome. And then I did a print version through Amazon, has their Create Space program, which allows for self-publishing physical copies that are sold through the Amazon store. And the experience of actually getting it ready, like doing all the design work and getting a proof copy and actually getting it physically made was fine. But I would recommend, if you're looking to kind of drive your revenue, then you might want to look elsewhere, because their royalties that they actually pay out are very, very small. To give you an example, my Gumroad sales are a little over 400, and that equates to over $6,000, whereas my CreateSpace sales are over 600, and that's about $1,500. So if I had gone only the digital route, like I feel like that would have been a lot better choice. But that being said, I know there's a lot of people that I've gotten a lot of emails from people that might have seen the Gumroad version and needed a physical copy. So I think it's useful to have it if that's something your audience kind of wants. I know a lot of people kind of prefer paper books. I typically do for the most part. So it's something I wanted to have, and some of that's kind of vanity too. I want to be able to hold my own book and have it sitting up on my bookshelf, so that kind of fed into it too. But if I do decide to actually do a print version again in the future, then I might look at other services for actually doing something like that, or maybe even seek out a traditional publisher if that's an option. But it's been a mixed bag for sure.
Yeah, I went with, so like you said, print is not a good way to maximize revenue.
No,
I've
not at all.
always tried, up until now, I've always tried to maximize revenue. There's now a print version of Authority. That's what comes out on Tuesday, as well as other updates. But I'm learning, as I go down this road, that it's not a good way to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I did is I ended up working with a local publisher. They're local to Boise, and they read Authority and were big fans of it and wanted to produce a print copy of it. So working with them, they did pretty much everything. And we did a run of 2,000 hardcover books to start. And so, like you said, that got the price per unit a lot lower.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the downside is I have 2,000 hardcover books.
Yeah. Are you handling fulfillment yourself then?
No, I'm not.
Okay, yeah.
So they handle the fulfillment, and we're going to go on Amazon.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the nice thing about their Create Space program, is that it's on the Amazon store, so you can leave reviews and stuff. It looks more legitimate, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, the royalties are measly compared to selling a digital version.
Yeah. Samuel or Brandon, did either of you consider doing print editions, or was it always digital?
I took an approach where, even coming up with like a .mobi version or things like that, I was just like, I'm gonna go with PDF, and if the market demands I do something else, then I'll listen to that, and I'm not going to heavily invest in anything based off of an assumption. So far the PDF has done well enough by me, and a couple of people have written in, and I just respond and say, ask like, could I get a .mobi version, and typically I'll just say, which is true, that it's really illustration heavy and it's just not quite the same experience. So that's why I went with PDF, and they're like, okay, and just buy the PDF. So as far as the print version goes, I didn't want to go with I don't know if CreateSpace, is that like the Amazon on-demand printing service?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen some books that have come out of it, and they look kind of like inkjet level printing quality.
I've been generally happy with it. I think the main drawback is the cover. The saturation of the ink isn't very good. So that's like, it doesn't look as professional if you went to a local printer or something a little bit more pricey, But generally, it's fine for the most part.
Yeah, so that's been one thing for me where, especially using this as like a touch point for my consulting work and things like that, that I really wanted it to have really high quality standards. And I thought that were I to do a print run, I would probably go work with somebody locally or something like that, and take that approach as opposed to just doing the like having Amazon run to Kinko's for me or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Brandon, did
Yeah,
you
I just went
think
with
about print at all?
PDF originally, and I had almost the opposite experience. My audience very quickly told me that they wanted every other format. Um, and so I never considered the book route. There was so much hanging over my head that that was like another obstacle that I just dodged it entirely. So on the day of launch, I sent out, had the PDF up there, and then immediately people started asking for both Mobi and EPUB, and I took the same approach, which was there's a lot of code, and I spent a lot of time making it formatted and color coded and everything, and formatted properly, and those other formats didn't do it justice in my head. And I had made them when I exported the book, but I didn't include them in the Gumroad package for that reason. And so when people started to immediately ask for them, I was like hesitant at first, and then the more emails came in, I said, well, this is why, and I said the same thing, and I said, well, here's the Mobi, for instance, just know that the code may not look perfect. And then they would write back later and say, hey, I looked at it and it looks fine to me, and I was like, well, fine is a relative term, and as long as they were getting value, I guess that was like the important part. I might have been a little more critical, but at some point the emails were overwhelming enough where I just uploaded the Mobi and the EPUB version to Gumroad. So I guess it was I updated the book the next day based on just some things that people had gave me feedback on, and included those versions in there at that point, and immediately got a response saying thank you so much for including them. A lot of people I suspect wanted them but didn't reach out and say can I have them, and so when they saw them, I think they were probably thankful that they were in there then. So that was I could have probably avoided 150 emails that day if I just included them from the start.
Nice. Yeah, with my first two books, since they're so design heavy, I used the same line that Samuel used and just said that's why I only did PDF.
Yeah, I got that from you. I stole that from you, by the way.
Okay. And but for authority, it's so text heavy that I actually did EPUB and Mobi versions. The only thing that's annoying about that is then when you update it, you're like making a change in each file, because I haven't found a good workflow for generating them or anything like that. So that was a bit of a hassle. But yeah, let's see. I'm gonna try to find another question. I guess as it's about time to start wrapping this up. So as a question to end with, like, what's one thing that that you would share with someone who was just getting started writing their book? Maybe they've gotten an idea, they're starting to put together a landing page, they're early on. What's one piece of advice you'd give them?
I would probably say that apart from consistently putting in the legwork to actually get it done, I would say just start posting about it on a blog somewhere as soon as possible. Get a landing page up quickly, get a blog up quickly, and talk about the process, because that will do two things for you. It will open up to your brand, to your audience. It'll start growing that audience, and I think kind of writing about the process, more importantly, for me at least, it's a good way of kind of reinforcing the process itself and kind of giving you the confidence boost you need to actually follow through with completing a book. So yeah, I would just say get out there as quickly as possible and start talking to people, start getting your name out there, start getting your work out there.
Nice.
I totally agree. Consistency, showing up every day. There's a lot of people that can't show up every day to something, especially if they do it on the side and it's not their full-time job. So, if you can show up every day and ultimately move to, an end product, whether it's a month or 3 months or 5 months, you'll be ahead of probably 95% of the people out there.
Yeah, I concur. The tear off the Band-Aid approach, I think, is a good way to go. I also genuinely recommend following the Nathan Barry playbook. as far as the what's laid out in authority is pretty easy to follow if you're committed to it, and kind of puts things on rails for you. So I do genuinely recommend that. This one thing that I wish I had done that was not mentioned in authority was selling the book in person before trying to sell it to mass people at scale. That when I mentioned screwing up the launch and screwing up the tiers and things like that, like ultimately the pricing isn't. If people balk at the pricing, it's either because you're not delivering enough value, or you're just not communicating that value very well. And for me, it was the latter. And I really wish I had just gotten 5 people, 10 people on a Skype call and just said, look, you're the kind of person that I'm going to be selling this book to, and just try to go through that process personally and hear what their objections are and use that to turn to change my sales page and my sales copy and address their objections through that, and scale it out that way. So that's probably the hardest lesson that I learned. But overall, I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Nice. I think that's a good way to go, and it can also help with validating an idea. Is if you go in person and try to, in person or over the phone, and try to get someone to buy something from you, and don't just ask, "Would you buy this?" but like actually take it all the way through to trying to collect credit card information, and that's when you get the real feedback. And so in your case, you could get your sales page up, then you could get on Skype individually with like 3 different people, and just say, "Hey, please go to this page and just talk through it." Like what you're thinking, try to vocalize that. That's something that you do a lot in usability testing, and I bet you'll learn a lot. And people will go like, they'll say things like, "Oh, well, I clicked on the book and the book didn't go anywhere." That's a really common mistake that even I still have on my landing pages, where like the book graphic gets clicked all the time, doesn't go anywhere. So
one thing I hear a lot, like, because there's one thing I think I picked up from either you or Patrick McKenzie, was like the idea of having a like showing your book cover in book format, just to communicate like that it's a tangible thing that has value.
Mm-hmm.
And like I still get emails from time to time where people will be like, "Let me know when it comes out in ebook version. I'll buy it then." It's like that's the only thing that it is right now. So. There are definitely usability issues that you can refine as you go, and that was probably the scariest part of the launch. Is I knew I was, especially in my case, I was still literally editing the file that was the book, like the PDF itself, up until a couple hours before I launched, and I really wish I had been a lot more disciplined and just having a hard stop and then giving myself several days to just work on all of the sales material instead of just kind of fumbling on the 1-yard line, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I've done that with just about every launch, where I've been working on it up until the last minute. Like, to give you an idea, when the App Design Handbook came out, I was trying to get files uploaded to Gumroad at like 1:30 in the morning, right before launch, and that was when I was going to launch it like. I think it was the time when I launched super early, so I was trying to launch at like 6 a.m. or something, because I wanted to launch at 8 a.m. Eastern, which I now do launches later in the day. But so a plug for Gumroad there is that Ryan and one of the other developers at Gumroad were like helping me upload files and get things worked out at 1 or 1:30 in the morning. So anyway, I don't know if they still do that, but they're an awesome company to work with. Let's see. I think that about wraps up what I want to cover. I guess I'll answer a few questions that people have coming up in the chat. First, people are asking about if the next version of Authority, which launches on Tuesday, will be a paid upgrade or not. And I actually went back and forth on this a lot. You can make decent money by launching a new edition of a book. And doing like a heavy discount. Like on the App Design Handbook, I did 70% off for anyone who had bought the previous version and was buying the new one, because there was a ton of stuff that was rewritten there. And in this new edition, there's not that much that's rewritten. It's mostly that, I'm launching the hardcover and it's launching on Audible as well, so there's an audiobook. And so what I've just decided to do is all the new case studies that are bundled with it, and those other things will be a free upgrade. So for everyone who's purchased it before, and then if you want to go get a print copy, which I think you should, that'll be available on Amazon. Also, for anyone who has read the book already and really enjoyed it, then I would say go to Amazon, write a review. I would really appreciate that. I think right now it has one review on Amazon, and it'd be cool if that was more like 20 or 30 by Tuesday. So if you could write a review, I would appreciate that. And then it'll come out on Audible. Yeah, and just if you enjoyed the book and all of that, share it. I would appreciate that a lot. Coming out with the new edition, there will also be 15 case studies of different stories. All three of you guys are case studies in there, and there's 12 more, of just sharing all the numbers and details of writing a book and lessons learned. So there's a lot of great stuff there. And then, of course, just like the book has had for a while, there's lots of video interviews and tutorials, and the recording of this will also be bundled with Authority going forward. What else? I'm trying to think. Is there anything else you guys can think of that I should cover about Authority? I'm just looking through the list of questions to see. Oh, someone's asking if the chat history will be available. I don't know. If that's something that you want, the chat history from this call, I would copy and paste it into a Word document. That seems to be the most efficient way to do it at this point. Otherwise, I think it's time for me to get some work done. I've got some new features in ConvertKit that I'm trying to ship today, and yeah. Oh, someone's asking for a link to Amazon. I don't know. Somebody. Well, maybe I can Google this. Authority, Amazon. I bet it'll come up. I should have this link, but there we go. Oh, interesting. Hold on. We'll get it. There we go. Okay. There's Authority. If you've read it already and want to write a review, I would really, really appreciate that. If you're going to buy it, I guess there are 11 in stock. They'll fully be in stock on Tuesday, and that's when the big push will be. So you can wait till then if you want. That's weird to tell people that they can wait to buy your book. Anyway. The other thing is I'm going to drop everybody's books into the chat. So Brandon, you've got your book on building a Ruby gem. Samuel's is on user onboarding. That's in the chat. And then Jason's book on modern HTML email. So if you guys enjoyed this chat, go buy their books. Yeah, I assume you guys are, happy to answer questions from up-and-coming authors and that kind of thing in the future, right?
Yeah,
Of course.
Will you guys go through and maybe just say, starting with you, Brandon, where we can find you online and maybe how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, my book, blog, email course, all that's on my website at brandonhilkert.com, Hilkert. And Twitter is just Brandon Hilkert, and GitHub is Brandon Hilkert. So pretty easy to find through one of those means, and I'm pretty responsive. So shoot me something.
Nice.
I'm samuelhulick.com, SAMUELHULICK, or useronboard.com, which is like user onboarding, but that was taken, so I didn't do the ing part. Either of those, I think you can get in contact with me, and I'm a pretty approachable dude. So if you have any questions, I'm very happy to field them.
Nice.
Yep. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at RodriguezComJ, and then my website's rodriguezcomj.com. And yeah, just ask me anything. I'm always happy to help out.
Sweet. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out for the last hour, hour and a half or so, and I'll talk to you all later.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cheers.
All right.